Gibson, and this is Caitlin McFarland, and we're the co-founders of ATX Television Festival, now from the couch. And if you've been with us all weekend, we're going to pretend you aren't tired of hearing us introduce ourselves. Welcome to our Saturday night marquee event, From the Couch. We've seen a lot of great things and heard from some amazing people, and there's still a lot of great programming and exciting conversations ahead of us.
Last year, on this very night, we were also celebrating with Showtime, but it's a year later and a lot has changed. Hell, a lot has changed in the last week, day, probably in the last hour, but we truly find comfort in being here with all of you again, just in a new way. A lot of you know that we're a small organization. There are 5 full-time staffers who work to present the festival, even in this new iteration, but there are countless more dedicated to helping us get here. We feel we need to make sure people know that you may see big brands like Showtime on our marquees and think of them as nameless, faceless corporations, but they're anything but. Just like the festival and just like your favorite TV series, it is because of a combined group of individuals who believe passionately in community and story that we are here tonight. And for us, as we pivoted to our homes and our couches, it was people like Jana, Susan, Amy, Dom, and Becca, 100 more at Showtime who supported us, who supported this show and our community with the belief that story matters. We couldn't be more thrilled and proud to have this conversation tonight. Ever since we saw the first announcement that Ethan and Blumhouse would be working to bring James McBride's stunning book to the screen, we couldn't wait to see what they would deliver. We've been not so gently pestering all parties about it since at least last September. So the fact that they're allowing us to showcase it 2 months ahead of the premiere feels like an accomplishment and a gift.
We didn't need any convincing to know and believe that this was a story and characters that we needed to have included in any iteration of our festival. Now, perhaps more than ever, it is timely and important to have this conversation, and we thank them for joining us. Now we'll get off the screen and leave it to your spectacular moderator, Sarah Rodman, who will introduce your panelists following this trailer of The Good Lord Bird.
My name is John Brown, and I am here to defeat slavery. They say I'm a criminal. They say I am insane.
John Brown weren't normal, but I was gonna stick by the captain, same as he always stuck by me, crazy as he may be. I ain't never been shot at till I met you. Truth be told, I ain't seen a person murdered till I met you.
I would stay off that subject entirely.
As gunfighters of the gospel, we are allowed a few indulgences.
Tell me, how many are in his army?
Damn near 10, I guess.
10?
10.
You counted 10? 10! That's not even a dozen!
I don't like this. Old man, the cheese has slid all the way off your biscuit.
We're gonna start a revolution.
Hi, everybody. I am missing you all. I am missing Austin. I am missing ATX Fest. We should all be getting vegas right now and standing in lines and being sweaty and complaining about standing in lines. And hopefully that's something that we'll be able to do again soon. I know that many of you watching this right now know how enterprising Caitlin and Emily are, and I'm so glad that they were able to pivot to the couch where we are all spending so much time right now. And I am equally glad that we are able to have this conversation today with a show that I think a lot of people are going to be talking about for a lot of reasons. It is Showtime's Good Lord Bird, which premieres on August 9th. And it is a really special, interesting, ambitious project. And so I'm super glad to be joined today by executive producer and writer James McBride, upon whose novel, a National Book Award winning novel, this was based. So please join us, James. I am also so glad to be having join us today, executive producer and star of Good Lord Bird, Mr. Ethan Hawke. Hello, Ethan. And also joining us, what is going to be one of the breakout performances of the year that everyone is talking about. I guarantee it right now. The young man who stars alongside Ethan, Joshua Caleb Johnson. Please join us. To Ethan's drum roll. Hello, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us today in this weird new world that we are living in virtually. Where's everybody coming in from? Joshua, where are you beaming in from?
I am coming in from Los Angeles, California.
Well, hello from across the way, also in Los Angeles. Ethan, where are you?
I'm at a friend's house in Connecticut.
Excellent.
by a small beaver pond, which is pretty nice.
That sounds pretty idyllic, actually. James, where are you?
I'm in the hinterlands of New Jersey at the moment.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad to see you, all your faces, and see that you are all safe and sound at the moment. James, I want to start with you because this is where the story starts with your novel. And I would recommend everyone read it. Now that I have seen a few episodes of this show, I am going to go back and read this book because it is so interesting. And I'm curious what the original catalyst for you writing this story was. And if you could explain the story a little bit, just a synopsis for the folks who have not read it.
Well, The Good Lord Bird is about a young African-American boy, about 12 years old, who ends up being kidnapped by the great abolitionist John Brown. And when he gets kidnapped by John Brown, he's living in Kansas, and he's so scared. He looks kind of like a girl, so John Brown just assumes he's a girl. And so this boy posing as a girl, because this crazy white guy snatched him from his home, and his father was murdered during that snatch, just decides to be quiet and witness one of the great events of American history, the attack on Harpers Ferry by John Brown, which truly happened. So it's a story that's told in a funny way. It's supposed to be funny. It's supposed to be, full of caricature. And I did it because I didn't know how to tell this wonderful story of this great American that so few people knew about. I just decided to try to tell the story in a humorous way that would make people smile and make them feel good about what John Brown tried to do and what he did, really, which was change the way we see each other.
And it's interesting because I was expecting, because it was a story about John Brown, for it to be a solemn drama. And so when the first episode started and it was clearly comedic, I was like, wait, what's happening? But it's so great that this is something that you combine. But as a writer, and Ethan and Joshua, for you, like, this is a serious story sort of on its face historically, but how do you calibrate, James, sort of imbuing comedy into a story like this?
Well, I mean, Ethan is more qualified to speak to sort of the actual timing elements. Like, there are lots of things in the actual series, like the play between him and Joshua, with Joshua's playing the boy, unnamed Onion, and Ethan playing John Brown. That there's a lot of it has to do with timing and the choreography of movement that they learned to put together, working together so long. And also with some of the other characters like David Diggs, who plays Frederick Douglass, there's some really Abbott and Costello timing moments that they managed to make happen. But in writing the book, I just wanted people to smile and to realize that we have to give each other a chance to say, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. And none of us is perfect. And, some of us are, blondes don't have more fun. It's not really the rules that we have adapted to live by are wrong. And that's what John Brown really represented. And I think that's what Ethan and his wife Ryan really saw in the book. And that's really why we're here.
And Ethan, to that point, how did you come to this project and to come to Showtime with that?
Well, to kind of, my wife and I both read the book. It started, I was reading it and I was laughing so hard in the bed that my wife kept saying, what is that book? And I said, it's the story of John Brown. She's like, why are you laughing so hard? Like, what is this? So then she had to read it. And she said, oh man, you got to play John Brown. And I said, oh, you can't make a movie because, that I'm of the time period when you make a movie of a great book, you have to reduce it to such a small frame. And she was like, get your head on straight. It's 2019. We can make a limited series of this. And I was like, wow, that's a pretty good idea, actually, to really tell the story. And it's kind of like what I used to tell crew and people coming on board who ask your exact question. They expect it to be the bluest eye. They expect it to be solemn. What that does is it all of a sudden makes everybody unsure where they are, and they start listening. I don't know about you, but I have learned more probably. I've had my opinion changed more often by humor than I have by somebody pontificating to me. You know, I've learned from Chris Rock. I've learned from Richard Pryor. I learned from Red Fox. Those are people who who knocked my way of thinking to the, on its ass. And I thought, wow, if we could really manage to maintain this tone, the McBride's tone, we could give people an opportunity, like James said, to say, I'm sorry, and to heal. Humor and love are the two really useful tools for healing pain, and I was in shock, to be honest with you, when we got to Harpers Ferry and Joshua and I are acting out this scene of the raid on Harpers Ferry. It is so unbelievably dramatic and thrilling and exciting. I couldn't believe that there aren't 25 movies about the raid on Harpers Ferry. And I'm like, why didn't Orson Welles do this? Why didn't Jason Robards do this? Why didn't Christopher Plummer play this part? It's such a great character. And the answer is a little bit in the news today, which is...
Well, that was, one of the things I was going to bring up. I mean, for all of us in a conversation that is long overdue, that we are trying and struggling and sometimes succeeding in having right now, that what an insanely, bizarrely timely time for this series to be happening, when so much of what you all are addressing is sort of this, like, knocking the white savior trope on its head. So many times that Onion says, it's so interesting that this white man has decided what the Negro is good for the Negro and what the Negro needs to do, but is not actually asking the Negro what they want. And that's so much of the conversation, obviously with different language, that we're having right now. And I'm curious for all of you, for Joshua, you too, how it feels to be coming into this world at this moment with this show that is literally about the issues that people are taking to the streets about still 200 something years later.
I feel personally that this show, it's obviously great timing because, all the protests and rioting. I feel it all just comes back to the same concept as John Brown once taught, and it's everybody deserves equality and every man is created equal. We all bleed the same blood. Like if I cut my arm, Ethan cuts his arm, the same type of blood is gonna flow throughout our veins. So on the streets, all this inequality and Black Americans being treated in an ill manner and as subhuman almost is not right at all. And I feel like this show is gonna most definitely put a humorous, almost comedic touch to a very dark subject.
I would add that John Brown didn't ask any white people what they thought either. He didn't ask anybody anything, but he was driven by the drumbeat of justice. He was consumed with the idea that there's something wrong with the world that allows one person whose skin is different from another to be somehow considered superior. He would often say, God is no respecter of persons. I never forget reading that. I used to love that. I know Ethan delivered that and look, Ethan's performance in this piece and his career has demonstrated and will demonstrate to people today who are going through this horrible time that we believe in justice. And we may not live to see it all the way, but it is coming. And the most heartening thing about what these people are doing today in these difficult moments is that they are sacrificing almost everything so that we can talk about these issues in real ways. And that's something that my generation was not able to do. Some of us could, but we couldn't do it in the widespread way that these young people can do. Ethan and I were just talking about this earlier. We've reached a point now in some of this discourse where white people are no longer overcome with guilt so they can't talk about these areas cleanly. We've reached the point now where the discourse is getting real. It's reached that sort of 2 o'clock in the morning college rap session level but on a much more widespread way than I've ever seen in my life.
One of the important lines to me in the story is that John Brown was a real Christian, right? He believed in his holy Redeemer. And, there's a line about somebody says to one of the black guys who's leading the slave insurrection, says, "You really think John Brown's going to save you black folks?" And the coachman is the character played by Victor Williams, who's a brilliant actor, says, "He's not here to save us. He's here to save you," And that's the truth, because from John Brown's, it's the white people that are living in sin. He was equally, if you're seeing everything in the eyes of your maker, right? There's one group that's in the wrong and one group that's not in the wrong, And so he was trying to wake, Harper's Bell was a great bell ringing. Harper's Ferry was a great bell ringing, and it rang the bell. It split Virginia in half, and it split the country in half. It's like 19 months later after Harper's Ferry, the whole country's at war. And John Brown had a vision of this, that he kind of felt like David with Goliath, that he felt it was his job, that he was so angry at the North and their apathy and the racism in the North, as well as the South, that he saw this in terms of biblical proportions, that there needed to be a great, great healing, and that it was going to come with a lot of pain because there was a sin, and that he kind of had this vision that it's dark. It's dark stuff, but
it's very dark. And Brown has been a really polarizing figure from the very beginning. And it's so interesting. Because he killed people. And I'm not sure if the justification was that, it's a means to an end, right? I am washing this place clean by
it's important to note though. I don't want to cut you off, but it's funny to me that people say, because I was playing the guy down south, right? And everybody say, but he killed people. And I'd look at this statue of Robert E. Lee, and I'd look at this statue of Jefferson Davis and Stonewall Jackson. I'm like, they killed people too. It's not the killing that really actually bothers people. Do you know?
Right. And also, that's a very good point. And I would also add that there was plenty of time and there were plenty of people during that period who believed in what was called moral suasion. They felt that the moral suasion would persuade America to change, and it did not. These people are not marching on the streets these days, and they're not getting rubber bullets in their faces and in their kidneys because they feel that someone's talking is enough. Obviously, talking is not enough. We need action, and we need it in a big way. We need it not in the way that where people get hurt and merchants lose everything, because so many people who are in business are already suffering because of the real carnage is a virus that when God said, okay, I'm going to change America, no matter how powerful someone's tweet can be, when God says, all you have to do is suck in air and I'll straighten you out, then that's God speaking. And that really, John Brown was a person who didn't use his power for most of his life. Jesus did not use his power. He used his power sparingly, because he had so much power. The power of love it covered everyone. Every once in a while, he created a miracle, and the miracle was a beautiful thing. But most of the time, his power was in his ability to not have to use it. Now, those in power now have used most of their power. They think that they can march out and da-da-da. But John Brown attacked Harpers Ferry with 19 people. That's like going to the Pentagon. That's like 20 of us or 100 of us going to the Pentagon and taking it over. And he did it because God was watching him. And so, George Floyd did not die for nothing. If we don't learn to speak to each other and study history and see what John Brown and people like him were trying to show us, then George Floyd died for nothing. But he did not die for nothing.
Absolutely. And I'm not arguing that the Confederacy didn't kill people, that the Union didn't kill people. I think what sometimes people wrestle with John Brown is if you are presenting yourself as a man of God, then maybe going to somebody's house in the middle of the night and killing them because they liked slavery, not because they had slaves, is maybe like a moral issue to wrestle with. I'm not saying that violence is necessary.
For sure. Listen, I'm a nonviolent person. I believe in justice and love and mercy and forgiveness and healing. And I believe in the right manifestation of anger for change. I get all this. I don't want to go into anybody's houses and chop their head off, right?
Right.
John Brown was willing to do that. John Brown is a complicated person.
That's my point.
Yeah, you are 100% right. But one of the things, I'm an actor, and you know what happens when you're an actor is you kind of invite this person into you, right? And you start to become their lawyer and see the world from their point of view and from their eyes. And this is a guy, right, who was nonviolent abolitionist into his 50s. His father was a nonviolent abolitionist his whole life. His grandfather rode with George Washington and was protesting the Declaration of Independence because of what was written about African Americans, right? He came from a long line of spiritual people that believed in the unwavering equality of mankind. And I went to, this is kind of a funny story if I'm his lawyer, right? Is I went to Elba where, you know, up by Lake Placid where he was living. And and I went to the tour guide who ran his home, such a beautiful young man, right? He's living there. And I said to him, the thing about scour history, it's very rare to find somebody who turns to violence in their 50s. You know, Che Guevara's, Cadastro, you know, people who do it, revolutionaries do it young. Like, what happened? And this guy was very powerful about it. He said, you know, he was up there in Lake Placid. He was trying to teach escaped slaves how to farm. You know, he had all this land up there and he's teaching black folks how to farm. It was Timbuktu, right? And they're having a pretty great time. I mean, a tough time in a tough world. And he sent some of his boys to go down to Kansas to settle so they could vote against slavery. And his boys got beat up. Some bad stuff happened to his sons. And this tour guide made me stare at John Brown's handwriting on one day and his handwriting afterwards, right on the time before he went to bloody Kansas. And this tour guide told me, I think he had a stroke. I think he had a stroke. And I think that he really finally understood his mortality. And he really believed that he had done nothing for the cause. And it really hurt him to die having done nothing for the cause. And this tour guide has read all his journals and all his letters and says, really thinks he went down there to get killed. He was a better gunfighter than he ever thought he would have been. And it just kept going his way. And he started to feel like he was doing, you know, some kind of successful change.
He got radicalized, which is what is thankfully happening to a lot of people right now. But James, I want to ask you a little bit about this sort of, obviously this is historical fiction. You are taking liberties. There are things that we can't know, but there is this divide between the people who think that he was this wonderful, I mean, everybody thinks he's this great revolutionary, right? Because he is, but there are also people who thought he was crazy. And I feel like you're leaning into that a little bit with Ethan's portrayal of this, which I'm guessing is also from the book, that there is a monomania here, that like maybe there's an emphasis on the mania.
That's a difficult question. I mean, I must have read about 25 books about John Brown. And, you know, a good many of them treated him as if he were an absolute moron, like he was nuts. And during that time, look, if I come to your house with a cat like this, okay? We sit at the table, okay? I drink my coffee, the cat drinks my coffee, and then the cat says, listen, do you have any? No, and then the cat, and then and after a while, the cat says, are you driving? No. And after a while, you'll say, you know, that's a cat now, you know. You can't, I know you love it, but that's a cat. You can't treat it like a person. It's just a cat. If I did that with a gorilla, you'd really say, oh, you know, that's like if I came to your house with a gorilla who was in a suit, and I'd say, you know, and he says, do you have any more Grey Poupon? Yeah, sure. You know, you'd say, at some point, somebody would say, you know, there's a gorilla sitting here. The gorilla was racism and slavery, and John Brown just couldn't take it. He just said, this is enough. And yes, he did some things that he regrets, and a lot of us do things we regret. He had suffered greatly before he got to Harpers Ferry. He lost many of his children. Ethan knows the numbers better than I do, but he lost his wife. He lost many of his children, and he had 22 children. Many of them died in infancy. He felt the land was cursed and he wanted to rid it of it. And he was a Calvinist. And, you know, Calvinists have this whole belief in prophecy that, you know, whatever's happened is meant to happen. God had purposely meant it this way. You know, do I believe that he should have gone out and beheaded people? No. But on the other hand, before that happened, many millions of Africans were taken and dumped off the sides of these ships and treated the children enslaved and treated like dogs.
Can I tell you how John Brown would answer the question if he was crazy? It's when a society and a culture is buying and selling children, women, and men, and everyone is turning a blind eye, you have to get radical to see the truth of what you're doing. It's the society that was absolutely out of its mind. And to wake them up, he had to be radical. And he tried to not be radical for a long, long time. And yeah, I wish he followed the Sermon on the Mount. I don't want anyone's head to get chopped off, you know. And what James writes very beautifully is the first guy he really kills is a guy who's just trying to make bread. He doesn't even own any slaves. But, you know, to get yourself, I think that the way I play, you know, I'm not playing John Brown. I'm playing John Brown as dreamed by James McBride, right? I'm chasing the same muse that was talking to James, you know, because we're trying to tell a story. We're trying to make art. We're trying to get you thinking and trying to talk. We're not saying this is the truth. We're not saying we know the truth. We're trying to make a piece of art about there's a lot of big moments. And one of the moments in this country's history is happening right now. You know, some of them happened, Rodney King, Martin Luther King. You know, there's a lot of moments you can point to. And Harpers Ferry is a big one because he woke up the white people of this. He began to wake up the white people of this country as to what they were doing. Henry David Thoreau couldn't live with himself after this. Walt Whitman couldn't live with himself after this. The white people, the white intelligentsia started to say, this is unacceptable. And he gave them courage because they could now say, okay, the violence is wrong. But guys, the violence is happening to Black people every day. You know, every day. We're talking, I mean, one of the sad realities of doing the studying about this time period is it's difficult to look at. It's a lot worse than you think it is, what people were doing to each other. It's really bad. So it's like, yeah, people were getting killed all the time. I can understand if you were woke enough to see that it's unacceptable to sell children in cages, that you might kill the wrong person in your anger. We're all watching this videotape that we see of name after name after name, you know, and we're not able to do anything about it. Well, this it's all tied, it's all the same, you know, it's getting, when you feel upset and you don't know the right way for your anger to manifest, I think John Brown just finally let go of the rope and pulled the sword out.
It's a through line. It is a through line from that moment to this moment. And yeah, a little radicalization can go a long way. And it's something that we need right now, frankly, as a Black woman in America. You don't need to tell me about exhaustion.
I'm not trying to. Yeah.
No, I wasn't accusing you of that. I'm just saying, like, I hear you, I feel you. But I wanted to shift both of your attention now to Joshua, because speaking of Calvinism and things that happen for a reason and things that are good, how did you find him, and what was that process like? How many folks did you see?
Well, let me tell you, there were a handful of things. Sometimes in life, you try to get somewhere or make something, and there's just obstacles everywhere you go, and you just can't get anything done. And sometimes the universe wants you to do something. And my wife and I met James, and we got along like a house on fire, and he believed in us, and he gave us the courage to try to get this made. You know, I've been around in Hollywood, and I felt I knew some doors to knock on to get people to pay attention to this book. And you know, the first person I went to, the door open, the Blumhouse, Jason Blum, an old friend, loved it. Doors open. Showtime, doors open. Okay, we can do it. And but I kept saying to everybody, if we don't find this kid, we shouldn't make it. We're only going as far as Onion goes. And in walks Joshua Caleb Johnson. And I knew right away, as soon as his first audition, I saw his first audition, I wasn't even there. And we had to audition him several times. We saw everybody. And there are so many talented people in the world. There really are. It's heartening, you know, when you audition like hundreds of kids, because you know, like, it's really inspiring. But one kid was, not only did he have the gift, but he also had the intelligence to learn. And see, I was a child actor, and I know that part of the game is being able to learn, because nobody's finished at 13, right? At 14, nobody, like, you got a lot to learn.
We're not finished now, Ethan.
Yeah, I'm not, you know, that's for damn sure. But in regards to acting, a lot of kids think they know everything. You know, it's one of the first signs of immaturity, right? Is that you think, oh, I got this. And you're like, I mean, I was that way. Well, I remember like the first time somebody, you know, I didn't want help learning to hit a baseball. I got this. I watched, you know, Joe DiMaggio, I can do this. And you can't hit, you know. But Joshua understood and had the humility, that weird cross between confident enough to be great and humble enough to learn.
That's so great. And Joshua, for you, coming into this experience, had you read James's book? Did you know John Brown's story? What was your sort of interest level before this started?
I never read The Good Lord Bird, the book itself, but the funny part is I was actually learning about John Brown in my 8th grade US history class while I was auditioning. So it's kind of like a funny balance.
Right, it happened for a reason. And so then you get this part, this amazing part. You obviously know about it going in, you do this audition, they love you, they give you the job, and they're like, and now you're gonna have to wear a dress and be dirty for the next several months. What was the experience like working on the show?
It was a once in a lifetime experience, I feel. I met a lot of amazing people. I did a lot of things I never thought I'd do. I learned a lot. I lived a lot. And it was just an overall really good experience.
I'm curious, was Ethan and other actors on the set, were they, you know, most people don't just walk up to you and say, here's some advice, kid. But do you feel like you learned things from some of the other actors on the set just by being around them? Were there people that offered advice?
Oh, yeah, most definitely. It was not just like someone coming up to me and saying, oh, here's what you should improve on. No, it was really observing everybody, because mostly everybody in the show was pretty seasoned actors. And so it's just, you know, picking the best from the best. Everything I saw, if I liked something, I'd write it down, or I'd tell my mom, can you just remind me to think of that later? And every little thing I saw really helped me improve my acting times 100.
And what were some of the things that for you to get into this character? Were there certain things either about the wardrobe, about just the lines themselves? What were some of the keys for you that helped unlock the character for you?
I think for me, in the beginning, I struggled a little bit with, you know, me being a boy. I don't want to wear a dress. It wasn't like what I wanted to do. But once I, like myself, told myself, you know, Onion's not wearing a dress because he wants to. He has to. He doesn't know whether it's life or death if he tells them that he's not a girl. And so once I understood that, I think I really transformed the character. And that's when the real acting started happening.
James, and I'm curious about that specific detail, the idea that, you know, the kid's young enough, and so he thinks he hears Henrietta, so he thinks it's a girl, but that's a sort of, that's a narrative choice that you're making. Why did you think it was necessary, interesting for Onion to be a boy playing a girl?
Well, I actually wanted Onion to be a girl, but I didn't feel confident enough to write about this experience from the perspective of being a Black girl.
Oh, that's good for you.
Yeah, I just didn't feel qualified, you know, to I mean, look, a writer should be, you know, you should be able to do everything, or you should try, but there are certain things that you better just, I just said, I'm not gonna try that. That's just too hard. That's not, so, but I thought that if he were a boy playing a girl, it would help. I mean, Black people are seen by white people as one great entity that is just one-dimensional. So, you know, it's like, you know, my sister's shy, but my brother's not. This one's tall, that one eats potatoes, this one's allergic to grass. You know, I mean, there's no multi-dimensional view of Black life, which means that when during slavery, you know, if you're dealing with what happened during slave time, if a crazy white guy goes in there bent on making slavery, you know, look, the first scene of the book and in the miniseries is John Brown goes into a place and says, "I'm here to free everybody." What? You know, let me out of here. I mean, you know, I ain't going, who are you? Look, if I went to you and said, "I'm going to steal your car because I'm against global warming," am I a car thief or am I a climate activist?
Well, in my case, you're a car thief.
Well,
depends
But I
if you
get your
drive
point.
it or not.
I get your point, though.
yeah.
And,
So
and it's a good point, but I love that was sort of your reasoning, and I agree with you. As someone who writes for a living, I think it is important to like be able to do a lot of things, but I think it's also great that you saw this somewhat as a limitation and made a choice that made sense for you for your voice. I think that's really great. I applaud that.
oh, thank you. Yeah.
And I just, we have seen the trailer, but I think now would be a good time for everybody to see the clip that Showtime has so generously provided, because I think it'll give people a really good sense of the tonal balance that you guys have going. It's just so fascinating to me, this combination of drama, history, comedy. And I want to ask a little bit about improv too, but first we are going to show everybody this clip. So I want to ask a lot of questions about that clip. A lot is happening there, but I want to ask first about your old friend Steve Zahn from Reality Bites showing up as a red shirt, and a little bit about guest casting in general. There are a lot of really good guest stars on this show. And Ethan, I know with Blaze that you did this a little bit. Was it sort of calling folks up and being like, "Hey, want to come play?"
Well, sometimes you need somebody to get on base, and it's really important. And one of the things when we were starting this that James said to me, I'd write to him, and my wife would write to him about like, well, explain to us this character. What is essential about this character? How did you see them? We're just trying to figure out like, what's the job of each character? What's their role? And one of the things that James, I'm going to paraphrase you here, I hope I do it right, was that it was important that the white racist characters not have horns, because if they aren't real people, then the Black community's pain and suffering isn't real either. It needs to be a real world. So I need you to cast people like Chase as a real person. It's like, cast somebody you love in that part, and let's let him do it. And I thought one of the things that's important in the scene is, you have to have a guy who secretly kind of has a crush on old Joshua here, and doesn't even realize that he's a boy. And there's so much humor. I mean, one of the things that's brilliant about the conversation, Sarah, you were just having with James, is that he wrote it in a novel one way about, okay, this is why I'm going to put onion in a dress. But the fun thing about turning it into drama is now we can say every white person in the movie just accepts Joshua as a girl, and every Black person knows it's a boy dressed as a girl. Right?
That's my favorite thing about the show.
It just made me laugh so much, because it goes to show how we all we aren't really looking at one another, right? And we're not really looking. And so that was a real source of humor and an engine for understanding systemic racism as a drama tool, right? And so Steve, I needed a base hit from this character, and I needed this guy to come I needed an actor who would come at this character with love and understanding and be willing to be funny in this terrible position. So he's one of my favorite American actors. We started a theater company when we were kids, when we were like 20. And if Steve wasn't so funny, I really thought Steve was going to be Gene Hackman. I mean, he's one of the great dramatic actors I've ever worked with, but he's so funny that he's gotten pulled that way as an actor. Daveed Diggs, I saw Daveed in a play at the Public, and he was just, the whole play, I was watching this play, and the whole play, I was like, oh my God, he should be Frederick Douglass. Oh my God. And I went up to him afterwards and I said, hey man, I'm producing this thing. Any chance, would you ever want to play Frederick Douglass? He was like, hell no. I'm sick of that. No. I hate all that iconography, and I'm done with that. And I was like, well, all right, but can I send you the book? Just before you say no, read the book. He texted me, he read the book, he's like, I'm in. And it was awesome. You know, we have so many great cast members, you know, people you've heard of and people you haven't. But I think for Joshua and I, who were there all the time, they gave us so much energy.
Yeah.
And back to your point, James, which is such a good point, and is the point that I feel like I have been trying to make my whole life about Black people not being a monolith. And then to Ethan's point about how all the white people just accept that he's a girl and all the Black people automatically know that he doesn't. This, I think, is just such a good little example of how comedy actually works in favor of explanation, that it is exactly that this is what systemic racism looks like. We are all not a monolith. And this is the sort of dramatic evidence of this. Like, I think it's just such a great moment. But then I want to ask Ethan specifically about the characterization, because this clip is a good sort of example of how much shouting you have to do and how deep your voice is, just from like a physical, logistical level. This seems like it was probably a lot of work. Like, I mean, you are pitched way low in this whole movie, a whole show, excuse me.
You know, well, first of all, I'm glad you call it a movie, because I really think of it as this kind of 7-hour movie. And, you know, James writes in the book that his voice sounded like a thin and high, like a tall pine tree. And I worked on that, and I worked on that. And I drove up to North Elba, and I went to John Brown's grave, and I sat there and I tried to hear what a high pine tree sounded like. And I looked around, and I just thought, there's no way. There's no way that's what he talks like. I'm reading the letters, and I'm like, so I called James, and I'm like, tell me what this high pine tree sounds like. And James said, I think I got that wrong. Remember this call?
Yeah.
And I said, because I hear him like deeper than my register, and I want to work on this. And when I had James's permission, I went there with that, and I kind of found it. My grandfather was a politician in West Texas, in Abilene, and he was what do you call that, declamation? You know, he used to win prizes on the debating team, and he would shout at you at the dinner table. You know, I mean, you know, well, Ethan, what do you think about Jimmy Carter? You know, I mean, I'd be like, I don't know. And he was so sure of himself all the time. He probably couldn't hear also. So I had this idea that John Brown couldn't hear and was just used to shouting at people. And he was also really sure of himself. But I also secretly knew it's a long performance, and I was going to get quieter as the show went on. And it was kind of when you do those the big Shakespeare plays, you have to kind of work to find the music of when, you know, if people have to listen to your voice for a long time, you have to be, it's like playing one instrument too much. You can ruin it.
Well, I was worried about you. I was just listening to that voice, and I was like, I feel like there were a lot of lozenges when you would rap every day.
It's part of the joy of being an actor, is finding these different, you know, I played Chet Baker once, and I got to play like the whole part way up here, you know? It's really fun. You know, and like, it's part of the joy of acting is you realize that so much of our personalities are artifice. There's something real happening, but we tend as young people to pick a personality, and we kind of ride it. And that's even manifest in our voice. And it's one of the, I don't know, more interesting things about my profession is you start to see that more of us is flexible than we think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just have to say, though, I love that you drove all the way up there, went full method, listened to some pine trees, when some people would just be like, I'll figure it out. Like, I like things like, but if you hadn't done that, you wouldn't have called him to get the voice that you needed.
Yeah. And, you know, you got to have confidence in this game, you know, and the only way to get a confidence is experience. You got to know you did your homework, and then you can be confident. You're like, no, I tried that. That didn't work. I'm doing this.
And then I want to ask a little bit about improv, because I feel like maybe that was part of this process here. There's one scene in one of the episodes that I've seen where you're like kissing Jeb Stewart's horse, and the actor who's playing him is like, you know, Mr. Brown, please stop doing this. And it felt a little like, I mean, it's just such a funny, like there are all these little moments that I'm wondering if they were all actually in the script or if you guys played around with improv at all.
Well, that one wasn't. You are very right about that. James once told me that he regretted not getting into the novel John Brown's Love of Animals. In the research that I was doing, I found this just passionate love of animals. It's just crazy. And I don't know where I got this, but I'd read, I don't know if I read it about him but that he used to go up to like animals and say, you know, like go up to a horse and say, are you 3/5 horse? You know, are you 3/5 rabbit? Are you 3/5 turtle? There's no such thing as 3/5 turtle, do you know? And so I used to kind of play, anytime an animal was on set, right, Joshua? I'd goof around with that bunny rabbit and the turtle and
bunny, turtle, a baby goat.
I was always bugging the prop master to give me a mouse for this scene, give me a cricket for this scene. Can I have but they, you know, the animal rights activists were everything. You know, I couldn't catch a butterfly without getting yelled at.
Wow, reasonable. But was that moment particularly improv?
Yes, yes.
And then the actor just went with it because it's super funny.
Wyatt is a wonderful young man, and he was so game. This guy's going to be a big star, and he flew in on his own dime and came to do this little part. He played Jeb Stewart. It was part of what I wanted to do is to pay part of the idea of white people without horns. You know, yeah, Jeb Stewart is really great looking. Yeah, he's a really good guy, and yeah, he owns slaves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to talk a little bit about there is a point at which that it is not just implied, but said outright that Frederick Douglass had 2 wives, and I looked that up and can't seem to find actual evidence of that. And so for James, in terms of like a little bit of fear of people coming to this and being like, oh, this is clearly the actual story, because you have that chyron at the beginning that says, all of this is true, some of it happened. Like,
well, I mean, Frederick Douglass he's a complicated man and no one understands him but his woman, John Shaft. But no,
he's a bad mother.
Bad, you better shut your mouth. But I'm talking about, we can dig it. No, look, the guy had a wife that helped him get free, and then he had a white mistress, and he had him in his house at the same time. I mean, that's, look, if you're writing comedy, if you're writing a funny story full of caricature, yeah, I mean, that's ready-made. And so that's just like going and just buying a hamburger instead of cooking it yourself. So we just had so much fun with that. Daveed Diggs and Ethan had so much fun with that, and that's and both in the movie, I mean, in the series, and in the book, and in real life, the relationship between Frederick Douglass and John Brown was an extraordinary one. And although it is filled with disappointment from John Brown's perspective, it still shows how extremely crushed he was when he found out that Frederick Douglass wasn't all the way with him. And his relationship too, I mean, as a jazz musician, I walk around knowing that when I was a boy of 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, these guys would still walk around, Sonny Rollins and Train and Dizzy Gillespie, and they were all around. Well, during that era, Harriet Tubman, John Brown, Harriet Beecher Stowe, they were all, Frederick Douglass, they were here. They were here, Henry David Thoreau, they were around. They were like, they knew they knew and had contact with each other. And that just made it for a cast of magical thinking. I mean, there's a beautiful scene in the series when Harriet Tubman gives an extraordinary speech, and the way she's treated in this story, the way that John Brown treats her, and the way she appears, shows the kind of respect that she truly had not only but from John Brown, but from people of all types who really understood who she was.
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting. And I think things like this, again, this moment that we're in, helping to look back, to forward the conversation, you just want to, it's almost like I want to say, and here's the further reading that you should do after you watch this show that is, you know, extraordinary in its way and so funny and so ambitious. And I don't know, this is my recommendation to Showtime to like put a reading list at the end of other things that people can look to. In fact, something like The Color of Water would be a great thing to add to that list. But Joshua, I want to go back to you and this performance and about working with Ethan specifically, since so much of your work on screen in the series is with him. What was your relationship like? And did you feel sort of comfortable to fail, for lack of a better way to put it, with him, like for trial and error?
My relationship with Ethan was kind of a weird one. Like as soon as I met him, I felt this connection towards him that, like you said, it made it okay for me to fail. And he always had something positive to tell me. Even like through a failed attempt, there was something good that I could take out of it. And he made it okay for me to keep working and keep trying to better myself, and not even just acting, but just in everyday life.
And I'm wondering what you think as a consumer of this product too. Like when the show comes on, what would you say to people, other kids your age, to sort of entice them into watching something like this? What would sort of your pitch to them be why they should watch it?
My pitch to them why they would watch it would be, first of all, you don't get to see like this type of action, I should say, in a lot of modern day limited series, movies and things like that. Like you don't get John Brown. Like you don't see many of those type of projects. And so I would advertise it to like schools and stuff, you know, people that are learning about John Brown and things like that. And so it would give it a little bit more fun way to learn about American history. And
for you, since this is one of your biggest jobs so far, right, in your career?
The biggest, I think, yes.
So what are you, when we are able to go back into production and able to be together again, what are some of the things, the roles that you would like to play? What are some of the, like, are you interested in action or comedy or drama, everything?
I love every genre, but my dream role to play would probably be Miles Morales, the Black Spider-Man. Yes. I absolutely love the movie. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, I absolutely loved it. I love the book. I've read it. It's amazing. And I think about that role all the time.
All right, let us put this out into the universe of the Spider-Verse. Let us manifest this for you, because that's actually a perfect part for you. The minute you said that, I was like, yes, that makes sense. And so do you know sort of where your next job is going to be, or are you in a holding pattern at the moment?
Oh, well, right now I'm actually, before the pandemic happened and we were like, not able to film, I was actually filming some episodes for Snowfall, the show on FX.
Oh, fantastic. That's great. Ethan, do you know what you have coming up next?
Well, maybe, but can I just say something about Joshua real quick?
Please do.
You know, one of the things that he didn't say, you know, he worked hard and he learned. This is a huge show. You know, he very casually said, yeah, this is one of the biggest things I've ever done. I'm 50 years old this year. It's the biggest thing I've ever done. And I've been acting since I was his age. This guy didn't miss one day of work. He didn't miss 1 minute of work. He comes at it with, he's an athlete, Joshua is, and he has an athletic mind, meaning that he applies himself. And he understands the idea of you play as you practice, and you have to work hard all the time. And we really couldn't have done this without him, without his, not just his talent. Yes, obviously we couldn't do it without his talent, but his work ethic and the family that he comes from supports him. And it was really inspiring. And it was inspiring to everybody. You know, because if you have a young person as the lead of a giant ensemble and that young person isn't serious-minded, it undermines everything. And he understood the role that he played. And he did it so beautifully that I just have to chime in, okay?
Absolutely. We appreciate appreciation. And so just out of curiosity, I was wondering if had you been working on something pre-pandemic? Do you have irons in the fire?
I'll tell you the truth. The truth is that I was absolutely exhausted from finishing this. I don't think I've ever felt more spent as a performer. I think the fact that my wife and I were also producers took a lot out of the family. And I was just putting myself back together. I had decided that I just wasn't going to work until this came out. Like years went into this, from reading this book, and it just kind of you chewed me up and spit me out. And then right as I was trying to put myself back together, all this pandemic happened. So I really have no idea what I'm doing next. I have a few irons in the fire that when the world gets the green light again, I'm going to try to get made. But for me, so much of my life's blood and energy has gone into this story.
How many years between when you read the book and the show going into production?
I guess, when did we first meet? 2015?
At least 4 or 5 years. I mean, it's been
it's been
all right. So it's been a road. And James, have you completed another book during pandemic? Are you the person that has written King Lear, as we're all supposed to be doing right now?
Well, I don't know. If I wrote King Lear, I wouldn't even be here today. I'd be in the Bahamas getting grapes dropped into my mouth. No, I have a new book out called Deacon King Kong. It's out now.
It's brilliant.
And have you felt this time, though, just out of curiosity, James, as a creative person, I've asked sort of every actor, writer, producer that I've talked to during this time, have you felt like it has spurred your creativity, or has it put up a wall between you and your creativity, or somewhere in the middle?
No. I mean, my imaginative world is wide open. It's always Disney World. It's always open, and you never have to wait to get on the rides. It's just a question of going in. So, I mean, I'm happy to fold myself into my imaginary world the way things are now. The problem is that you really can't do it that much. You can't do it with the fervor and the long bursts that you could before, because you're too busy. You're busy paying attention to the things about you, because this is a time to really pay attention.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that I'm seeing a lot of clarifying moments, and I'm hoping that is something that will spread far and wide among our world, people being clarified in this moment that we have been forced to be somewhat still, even though many of us are still working. It has been useful in its way up until this moment. But James, now that you have seen some of the show, is this the vision that you were envisioning?
Oh, yeah. I mean, oftentimes writers say, oh my God, this really, they took the language of the book and just translated it into something that was magical. And it's been, what a privilege to watch it, to see what Ethan and Ryan and Mark Richard, the showrunner, did. They were not only faithful to the book, but they added other qualities that the book didn't necessarily highlight or possess. Listen, this kind of discourse, when you're dealing with comedic material about race and about class and about sex, requires us to think together collectively. And so I am convinced that The Good Lord Bird will be seen for a long, long time as a seminal piece of good old American storytelling. I'm so proud that it's going around the world. I'm very proud and honored that Blumhouse and Showtime and all the people involved have put their muscle and weight behind this piece of work, because I think John Brown deserves a place in American history. He's deserved it for a long time, and we've finally found a place for him.
Yes, and that, I think, is a perfect place to end. Before I let you all go, I want to remind everybody who's watching, The Good Lord Bird is in fact a book you can order and read or get at your library. And I would recommend also as highly The Color of Water, a book that James wrote that was very affecting for me personally. So I will take this opportunity to say thank you for that. And if you I know that we normally do this in Austin, so we've got some country music fans watching this. If you have not seen Ethan's movie Blaze, about the singer-songwriter Blaze Foley, criminally undersung singer-songwriter Blaze Foley, go Red Blaze tonight and check that out. Thank you, James. Thank you, Ethan. Thank you, Joshua, so much for being with us today in this virtual new world. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.